Pope Francis, and the history of electing new popes. Pope Francis has died after 12 years on the papal throne. Let's take a look at the remarkable life of the first South American pontiff in history, the 1,995-year history of the second oldest monarchy in the world, the ceremonies surrounding the deaths, elections, and accessions of popes, and what will be happening behind the walls of the Vatican over the coming days and weeks. Jorge Mario Bergoglio was born on December 17, 1936, in Buenos Aires, Argentina. His grandparents immigrated from northern Italy to escape the fascist regime of Benito Mussolini. Jorge was the eldest of 5 children, born to accountant Mario Jose Bergoglio and homemaker Regina Maria Sivori. They were raised in the lower middle-class neighborhood of Flores and were no strangers to poverty. Jorge studied chemistry at secondary school while working as a bouncer and janitor. During his youth, Argentina was in the midst of political turmoil. Populist leader Juan Perón was re-elected in 1952. His beloved wife, Eva, died just after the inauguration. Perón was opposed by the church, military, and U.S. government, who staged a violent coup to remove him. After graduating, Jorge worked as a food scientist in a laboratory. He had great respect for his first boss, Esther Balestrino. The young scientist was studying to become a doctor. His parents encouraged this path to success, but Jorge did not feel it was right for him. One spring day, the 19-year-old passed a church and went into confession. He was inspired by the priest and decided to join the seminary. During his time there, he developed a crush on a girl and doubted his future in a religious career. But when he was 21, he fell seriously ill with pneumonia. He nearly died, but a nun ensured he received antibiotics, and his seminary companions came to visit and donate blood. Multiple cysts and part of his right lung were removed, but he recovered. The brush with death changed his perspective on life. In 1960, Jorge joined the Society of Jesus and took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. The Society of Jesus, aka the Jesuit Order, was founded in 1540 by Spanish nobleman Ignatius Loyola with the blessing of Pope Paul III. It is one of many orders within the Catholic Church and is primarily focused on education. The Jesuits place particular significance on poverty, chastity, and obedience, and a willingness for their members to go anywhere in the service of the Church, even living in extreme conditions. It was largely Jesuits who established missions around the world from the 16th to 18th century and Christianized millions of native people. They have long been controversial and clashed with both secular governments and the larger Catholic Church. In 1759, the Church expelled Jesuits from many countries in Europe and their colonies. But in 1814, the Church lifted the suppression and the Jesuit order continued to thrive. Still, no Jesuit had ever been elected pope. Jorge received a master's degree in philosophy and taught literature and psychology at several high schools. In 1969, the 33-year-old was ordained as priest. In 1973, Jorge made a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, but his visit was cut short by the outbreak of the Yom Kippur War. He spent 3 months in Dublin, Ireland, learning English. Between 1974 and 83, Argentina suffered through another era of violent political upheaval, known as the Dirty War. Dictator Jorge Videla directed death squads to hunt down political dissidents and anyone believed to be associated with socialism and left-wing Peronism. 30,000 people were killed or disappeared. As a young priest, Jorge did not have the courage to speak against the dictatorship, as others did. His involvement with the bloody regime was later scrutinized. However, many reported that he refused to collaborate with Videla and helped people escape Argentina, even giving his own identity papers to a man who looked like him. In 1980, Jorge was named rector of the Philosophical and Theological Faculty at his alma mater. He went to Frankfurt, Germany, to write his doctoral dissertation, exploring the works of theologian Romano Guardini. He returned to Argentina to serve as a confessor and spiritual director. In 1997, Jorge was named Archbishop of Buenos Aires. He was deeply committed to social justice and serving the disenfranchised. He frequently took public transportation to visit poor people. Each Holy Thursday, he went to jails, hospitals, and retirement homes to wash people's feet. He doubled the number of priests assigned to work in shantytowns and became known as the, quote, slum bishop. Jorge practiced what he preached. He lived in a small apartment, dressed simply, and cooked his own meals, rather than taking up residence in an elegant bishop's palace. He restructured the archdiocese and criticized members of the church who lived extravagantly. He even sold the archdiocese bank shares and enforced stricter financial discipline. In 2000, he spoke out against the church's complacency during the Dirty War. Later, as president of the Argentine Episcopal Conference, he issued an apology for the church's failure to protect people. After that, the archbishop was much more outspoken about Argentinian politics and often opposed leaders. In 2001, Pope John Paul II named Jorge a cardinal. In 2005, Pope John Paul II died. Jorge attended his funeral and was considered one of the papabili, or likely cardinals to be elected as the next pope. He participated in the secret conclave of cardinals, and it was later reported that he was the runner-up, but made an emotional plea asking his colleagues to vote for Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger instead, in order to bring the conclave to a fast conclusion. Ratzinger was elected Pope Benedict XVI. He reigned for nearly 8 years and focused on returning the church to traditional values. He opposed same-sex marriage and condom use in areas of high HIV transmission. In 2013, Benedict made the shocking decision to step down because his advanced age was hindering his work. He was the first pope to resign since Gregory XII in 1415. Every pope since has died in office. The College of Cardinals met for a conclave, and after 2 days and 5 ballots, 76-year-old Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio's accession was announced. He was the first Jesuit ever elected pope, the first from the Americas, and the first non-European pope since Gregory III of Syria in 741. He was the first pope in history to take the name Francis, after Saint Francis of Assisi, a 13th century friar who led a life of poverty as an itinerant preacher. Francis's appearance on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica signaled a change in the papacy. Rather than donning a red, ermine-trimmed mozzetta and a gold cross as previous popes had done, he came out in a simple white cassock and the iron cross he had worn as archbishop. As Bishop of Rome, he immediately set out to reform the Vatican. He canceled millions of euros in bonuses traditionally paid to employees and cardinals on the board of the Vatican Bank. He gave the money to charity instead. Francis chose not to live in the luxurious papal apartments of the Apostolic Palace. Instead, he took up residence at a Vatican guest house. On his first Holy Thursday, he went to a detention center in Rome and washed the feet of 12 juvenile offenders. 2 were Muslim and 2 were female. His first Easter homily was a plea for world peace. Overall, Francis was a remarkably progressive pope. He made action on climate change, which disproportionately affects the poor, a focus of his papacy. He condemned climate change denial and criticized capitalism and consumerism. He was supportive of refugees and asked developed countries to welcome more immigrants. He took a permissive stance on divorce, which the Church had long condemned. He made women full members of the Roman Curia, but stated that women could not be ordained as priests. He called for better outreach to LGBTQ communities and decriminalization of homosexuality. He denounced the death penalty, abortion, and euthanasia. He spoke against the rise of right-wing populism. He negotiated with the Communist Party over their influence in appointing Chinese bishops. Francis was initially lenient on priests accused of sexual abuse, but in 2015 he visited Chile and was shocked at how few people came out to see him. He met with victims who questioned why he was believing the bishops instead of them. Francis apologized for his mistakes and for the mistakes of the church. He fired nearly all the bishops of Chile who had been sweeping abuse under the rug. He launched investigations which exposed and removed many abusers. He also apologized for the church's role in the genocide of Canadian Indigenous peoples. During the COVID-19 outbreak, Francis canceled his regular audience at St. Peter's Square to keep crowds from spreading the virus. He called for Putin to stop attacking Ukraine and for Israel and Palestine to come to a two-state solution for peace. Francis has called several synods, or councils of bishops and laypeople, to debate church doctrine, including synods on the family, on youth, and on the church in the Amazon region. He convened the Synod on Synodality. For the first time in history, 10% of the voting attendees were women. They shared ideas and experiences and discussed the future direction of the church. This synod is considered the culmination of Francis's work and the most important event in the Catholic Church this century. Francis's papacy was not without controversy. He infuriated many conservatives and was even called a heretic. From 2022, Francis used a wheelchair after a knee operation. In February 2025, he was admitted to hospital in Rome for bronchitis. He developed a respiratory infection and bilateral pneumonia. He was further at risk because part of his lung had been removed in his youth. The Pope was placed on a ventilator. He recovered from the ordeal, and after over a month in hospital, he blessed the crowd below his window and was released to his home, Domus Sancti Martha, where he was expected to recuperate for at least 2 months while maintaining a reduced work schedule. On April 20th, Easter Sunday, he blessed the crowd from the balcony and rode through St. Peter's Square. He also met U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. Pope Francis died the following morning, April 21st, 2025, at 7:35 a.m. at his residence. He was 88. Now that the papal throne is vacant, what happens next? When and how will the new pope be elected? And while we're at it, let's take a look at the history of the papacy and how the ceremonies surrounding the death, election, and accession of popes has changed over the centuries. When a pope dies, his passing is confirmed by a doctor and a ceremonial Vatican official who calls out his baptismal name 3 times. Hearing no response, the official will declare the pontiff dead and the papal office vacant. His gold signet ring and seal are broken, and the papal apartment is locked and sealed with a red ribbon. The public and media are informed, and 9 days of mourning begin. After being embalmed, the Pope's body lies in state in St. Peter's Basilica for the public to pay their respects. Funeral and burial will take place 4 to 6 days after the death and be attended by church leaders, royals, and dignitaries from across the world. True to form, Pope Francis chose to eliminate several elements of funerary pageantry in favor of a more simple ceremony. Rather than an elevated catafalque, his body will be displayed in an open wooden coffin, and he will be the first pope in a century not to be interred in the splendor of the Vatican. Instead, he will be laid to rest in Santa Maria Maiora Basilica in Rome. 7 other popes are buried there, the most recent being Clement IX in 1669. Popes haven't always rested in peace. In 897, Pope Stephen VI exhumed his predecessor, Pope Formosus, 7 months after his death, and put his corpse on trial. He claimed Formosus had seized the papacy illegally. The dead pope was declared guilty and his reign nullified. His body was thrown in the Tiber River. 15 to 20 days after the Pope's death, cardinals gather in Rome for a meeting called the Conclave. The structure of this secret election of new popes was established by Gregory X in 1274. The procedure has remained largely the same with minor adjustments for the last 750 years. The conclave is run by the Dean of the College of Cardinals. Currently, that is Cardinal Giovanni Battista. Cardinals under the age of 80 are eligible to vote. There are currently 137 eligible cardinals. Technically, they could elect any baptized Catholic male in the world, but they usually pick one of their own. The last time they voted for someone outside of the conclave was in 1378, when Urban VI was elected as part of the fractious era known as the Western Schism. During the enigmatic conclave, the cardinals are sequestered in the Sistine Chapel to cast their secret ballots. A candidate needs a 2/3 supermajority to be elected pope. One ballot is cast on the first day, then 4 rounds on each day after, until one candidate achieves a supermajority. During the process, the cardinals are housed in the Vatican and are completely sealed off from outside influence. They have no access to news, computers, telephones, or television. They are supposed to seek the guidance of the Holy Spirit in making their decision. But in reality, there is a lot of politicking. In the Middle Ages, elections were highly contentious, with factions and families vying for power. Conclaves often lasted for weeks. The conclave of 1268 dragged on for nearly 3 years before Gregory X was finally selected. To get the cardinals to hurry up, deans sometimes rationed their food, hoping to starve them to a decision. Today, they go a lot more smoothly. After each round of voting, the ballots are burned in a stove, and smoke exits out of a temporary chimney installed in the roof of the chapel. Black smoke means no decision has been reached. White smoke means a new pope has been elected. This tradition dates back to the early 1800s, when smoke meant no decision, and a lack of smoke meant a successful election. In 1914, black smoke was made by adding damp straw to the ballots, while white smoke was produced by burning the sealing wax on the ballots without straw. By the 1939 conclave, sealing wax was made with animal fat rather than beeswax. It produced a darker color, and the public was confused by the gray smoke. Since 1963, chemicals have been added to augment the smoke's color. And since 2005, the announcement of a successful election has been magnified by the ringing of church bells. Cardinals traditionally wear red to symbolize the blood of the martyrs and their willingness to die for their faith. Through most of history, red dye was produced by crushing the bodies of female Krims insects and was costly to produce. In 1244, Pope Innocent IV granted the privilege of wearing crimson hats to cardinals. With the secrecy of the process and no polls or campaigns, it is impossible to guess who the next pope might be. But Vatican watchers have nevertheless speculated on a number of papabili, or cardinals most likely to be elected pope. Favorites are Luis Antonio Tagle of the Philippines, Peter Turkson of Ghana, Peter Erdo of Hungary, Pier Battista Pizzaballa of Italy, and Pietro Parolin of Italy. But we can't know the future until white smoke rises from the Sistine Chapel. So in the meantime, let's take a jaunt through the papacies of the past. According to Catholic tradition, the first pope was Saint Peter, one of the 12 apostles of Jesus Christ. It is said that Peter, who was a fisherman, was given special authority over the church by Jesus himself in the year 30, 1,995 years ago. This means the papacy is the second oldest surviving monarchy in the world, after the chrysanthemum throne of Japan. After Jesus was crucified, Paul traveled to Antioch in modern-day Turkey, Corinth in Greece, and then to the capital of the mighty Roman Empire, spreading the Christian faith along the way. Emperor Nero did not take kindly to his preaching and had Peter crucified upside down in the year 68. But one of his protégés, Linus, stepped in as a leader of the fledgling religion. The line of popes continued and the Christian faith spread. By 312, Emperor Constantine converted and ordered his subjects to stop throwing Christians to the lions. He constructed a basilica on the site of Nero's circus, where many Christians, including St. Peter, were believed to have been executed and buried. The papacy endured through the fall of the Western Roman Empire. In 756, Frankish king Pippin the Short conquered central Italy and gave it to the church, establishing the Papal State, which is under the direct rule of the Pope. In the early church, many popes were married, and their sons would follow them into the priesthood in the hopes of being elected pope themselves. There is even a legend that in the 800s there was a female pope named Joan, who disguised herself as a man, only to be exposed when she went into labor during a procession, after which she was murdered for defiling St. Peter's throne. But the story of Pope Joan is now considered more myth than fact. In the 1000s, celibacy became mandatory for priests at all levels of the church, though this wasn't strictly followed. In 1309, Pope Boniface VIII came into conflict with King Philip IV of France. Philip captured the pontiff and had him beaten and imprisoned. When Boniface died of his wounds, the king forced the election of a French cardinal, and the next 7 popes ruled from Avignon. Gregory XI returned to Rome in 1376. From 1506 to 1626, the magnificent Renaissance religious palace that is the modern St. Peter's Basilica was constructed over the tomb of St. Peter. In 1870, Italy unified, and the Papal State and Rome were annexed by the new monarchy. King Victor Emmanuel II forced Pope Pius IX to relinquish his secular power and live as a prisoner in the Vatican, a 0.19 square mile area. The situation was resolved in 1929 when the Lateran Treaty between Pope Pius XI and Benito Mussolini established the independent state of Vatican City, with the Pope as its monarch. Including Francis, there have been 666 papacies, though only 664 actual popes. In 1032, Pope John XIX bribed cardinals to elect his nephew, Benedict IX. He was 20 years old, the youngest pontiff in history. He was driven out of Rome by Sylvester III. Then he returned to claim a second term. Within months, Benedict was persuaded to resign in favor of his godfather, Gregory VI, but he quickly changed his mind and returned for a third papacy. He was the exception, as most popes have been senior members of the church and elected in their old age. Thus, papal reigns have not been especially long, and there have been a lot of them. St. Peter is considered to be the longest reigning pope. He was appointed at the age of 30 and killed at 64, meaning he was pope for 34 years. The longest reign in the modern era was Pope Pius IX, who occupied the throne from his election at age 54 in 1846 until his death at 85, a total of 31 years. The shortest reigning pope was Urban VII. He was 69 when he was elected in 1590, but he died of malaria just 13 days later. 266 papacies over 1,995 years means the average reign of a pope has been just 7.5 years. Since 1913, there have been 10 popes, with an average age of 67 upon election, and an average reign of 11.8 years. Pope John Paul I was elected on August 26, 1978. The 65-year-old displayed no signs of illness, but on the morning of September 28th, just 33 days later, he was found dead in his bed from a heart attack. His successor honored him by taking the name John Paul II. He reigned for an impressive 26 years. The Pope is not only the spiritual leader of 1.3 billion Catholics worldwide, he is also the absolute monarch of the smallest nation in the world, the Vatican. While we usually think of monarchies as hereditary, in a system where leaders take vows of celibacy, other means are required to determine succession. The papacy is not the only elective monarchy. Kings of Malaysia are elected by and from 9 state rulers. The secular co-prince of Andorra is the democratically elected president of France. And monarchs of Eswatini, Jordan, Kuwait, Lesotho, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates are selected by various combinations of heredity and election. A new pope officially assumes the throne of St. Peter from the moment he accepts his election. No coronation is necessary. But in 858, Pope Nicholas I thought it would be fun. New pontiffs were crowned during a special mass on the first Sunday after their election. A papal tiara was placed on their head. This tiara dates back to the 8th century, long before the small ladylike stunners we now know as tiaras were popularized by Empress Josephine. The papal tiara evolved from a traditional bishop's mitre. The beehive shape with 3 tiers dates back to the 14th century. Over the years, there have been numerous papal tiaras. Pontiffs were often presented with tiaras from their place of origin, and cities tried to outdo each other with larger, more costly crowns. Emperor Napoleon I of France, Queen Isabella II of Spain, Emperor Wilhelm I of Germany, and Emperor Franz Joseph I of Austria all presented the popes of their day with extravagant new diadems. They are usually constructed of silver, then encrusted with gold, diamonds, and precious gemstones. Many tiaras were lost or destroyed over the years. In 1527, Clement VII was being held hostage by Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. He melted down all the tiaras and papal regalia to pay his ransom. In 1800, Rome was under Napoleon's control, so Pope Pius VII was crowned in exile in Venice, with a papier-mâché tiara upon which the ladies of Venice had attached their jewels. Today, there are 22 tiaras in the Vatican's collection. The heaviest, the one given by Napoleon, tips the scales at 18 pounds, or 8.2 kilograms, but it has never been worn. The heaviest tiara ever placed on a human head was Paul VI at 9.9 pounds. For reference, the crown of St. Edward, which British monarchs have long maligned as absolutely excruciating to wear, weighs in at a measly 5 pounds. After the Pope was crowned, he would sit upon the